Is it possible that the FIA is ruining the future of Formula One? How bad can things go when the world's best engineers call the cars of 2026 undrivable monsters? Today I tell you why Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, and even the drivers are about to declare war on the FIA. Subscribe to continue uploading more of this type of content now, if we continue. What should have been a protocol meeting without major surprises ended up triggering one of the biggest technical scandals in the recent history of Formula One. In December 2025, the World Motorsports Council met with the intention, according to the official agenda, of confirming minor technical adjustments for the 2026 regulations. However, what happened was a unilateral decision by the FIA that has left the teams furious and on the warpath. Far from listening to the multiple warnings from most influential teams, the FIA confirmed the most radical rules of the last 20 years. The word that is most repeated in the paddock is one: betrayal. For months, engineers from Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes had been in constant contact with the technical managers of the FIA, insistently expressing that certain provisions were dangerous, unviable, or simply incoherent with the DNA of Formula One. They asked for a partial redesign of the regulations, at least with regard to the active aerodynamic system and the control of air flows under the car. But the FIA turned a deaf ear. The result, a regulatory architecture that many within the teams have dubbed, without filter, the Frankenstein of the FIA. The FIA, for its part, has remained silent. Its only visible argument has been that the new rules are the logical step towards a more sustainable, more spectacular F1 and closer to the mobility of the future. But the technicians don't see it that way. They believe that these rules do not promote spectacle, but rather standardization. That they do not promote sustainability, but rather use it as an excuse to cut freedoms. Technology has historically been the soul of Formula One. Without it, the sport would not be the pinnacle of engineering that it is today. But when innovation is imposed without the right balance between security and control, there is a risk of crossing a dangerous line. That is precisely what has set off the alarm in the paddock with the implementation of the new X and Z modes, the active aerodynamic system that will be mandatory from 2026. The basic idea is not new. Spoilers that adapt in real time to optimize the car's behavior in different phases of a lap. But what the FIA has imposed goes far beyond current DRS systems or passive solutions. In the new regulations, the car will change its aerodynamic configuration drastically twice per lap. X mode, activated manually by the driver on the straights, will reduce downforce as much as possible to minimize drag and maximize speed. Upon reaching the braking zone, the system will automatically switch to Z mode, which deploys all available load to improve cornering grip. On paper, it sounds like an engineering masterpiece. But in practice, teams have detected a level of complexity and risk that far exceeds any previous active technology implementation in the category. In multi-equipment simulators, scenarios have been recorded where a failure in the transition between modes generates immediate instability. It's not just about the car getting slower. In certain cases, it becomes unpredictable with sudden loss of charge that can lead to spins or even high-speed accidents. And here lies the real problem. There is no margin for error. Additionally, the transition between modes is not fully automated. It requires direct interaction from a pilot, who must manage the activation of mode. This represents a new layer of cognitive tasks at a time, where multiple parameters are already managed: brakes, differential, engine maps, energy management, tire pressure, and traffic. Modern Formula One demands an extreme mental load, and with this system, the slightest error can translate into a loss of control. Some pilots have been clear: this is not help, is a trap disguised as progress. Another criticism that has emerged strongly is the impossibility of aerodynamically sealing the flat bottom of the car. In recent years, an essential part of performance came from how teams manage the vortices and airflow under the car to generate downforce without adding drag. Now, the FIA has limited these practices, forcing everyone to rely exclusively on the active system. This eliminates an essential part of the technical development and, even more seriously, forces us to rely on a single solution to control the behavior of the car. Total dependence on a dynamic system introduces a single point of failure. If something fails, the car loses both aspects: speed on a straight line and stability in a curve. From the engineer's perspective, the problem is not just that the system can fail. The thing is that there are no alternative solutions allowed to correct its defects. Regulations have closed all doors to creative development, forcing teams to design around a single solution imposed from above. This contradicts the competitive spirit of sport, where the freedom to find different answers is precisely what has driven technical evolution for decades. At the heart of the technical revolution of 2026 is the most ambitious and, at the same time, most controversial change: the new hybrid power unit with a 50-50 split between internal combustion engine and electric energy. At first glance, this modification seems a logical step towards a sustainable future. But when analyzed in depth, it becomes clear that this change represents one of the biggest technological challenges that Formula One has faced in decades. And what for the FIA is a symbol of progress, for the teams it has become a real technical, strategic, and operational headache. The key to the conflict lies in the force balance between the two sources of power. Under the new regulations, each car must generate exactly 50% of its total performance from the thermal engine and the other 50% from the electrical system. This means that there is no room to prioritize one side or the other, not even depending on the type of circuit, weather conditions, or driving style. This rigid distribution does not respond to a natural performance design, but rather to a regulatory imposition that limits technical creativity and restricts the development of efficient solutions. From the point of view of engine manufacturers, the challenge is twofold. On the one hand, they must design lighter and more efficient thermal engines than ever, capable of performing with barely half the prominence compared to current units. On the other hand, they have to integrate a more powerful and complex electrical system, which not only delivers half of the car's total power, but also does so in a constant and stable manner throughout a complete race. This implies more aggressive energy recovery systems, larger, heavier batteries, and much more sophisticated thermal management. Each of these elements represents a potential source of failure, wear, or imbalance, and the most critical thing is that this balance is mandatory. If on a given lap the electric motor fails to reach its 50% share, the car may be penalized or directly disqualified for technical non-compliance. This level of rigidity is unprecedented in the recent history of Formula One and creates an environment where the priority is no longer developing the best possible car, but simply one that complies with an imposed rule without flexibility. Teams feel that the category is being forced to adopt a power architecture designed more for a political agenda than for a high-performance competitive environment. A particularly controversial aspect is the introduction of the so-called override mode, a system that allows the pilot to manually activate a release of additional power from the battery at key moments of the lap. This button, similar in intent to the old KRS system, or DRS on a straight line, is designed to offer a momentary boost that allows you to overtake or defend a position. But its implementation generates a new layer of tactical complexity and operational risk. The driver must precisely calculate when and how to use this energy, knowing that incorrect use can deplete the electrical reserve and leave him vulnerable for several laps. Furthermore, the teams have discovered that this system is closely linked to the thermal behavior of the battery. If the temperature rises too high, which is common on hot tracks or in races with multiple safety car periods, the system goes into protection mode and limits energy delivery. This means that, in the middle of a duel on the track, the pilot could find himself without response, without defense, without power. And the most serious thing is that there is no room to modify that configuration during the race. Everything must be calibrated beforehand, leaving little room to adapt to changing or unpredictable conditions. In simulation tests, some teams report that maintaining a constant flow of power from the hybrid system involves operating in an extremely narrow thermal range. Too cold, and the battery does not deliver the necessary voltage. Too hot, and the system limits itself. This delicate dependency makes the cars of 2026 extraordinarily sensitive machines, where the slightest environmental change can completely alter performance. Instead of rewarding operational efficiency or race strategy, the result is being conditioned to a strict mathematical equation, imposed from a regulation that leaves no room for interpretation. What concerns motorists most is that this type of hybrid architecture, although ambitious in terms of sustainability, has no realistic application in the commercial automotive environment. Many consider the FIA's approach to be technologically sophisticated, but disconnected from real market needs. As electric road cars evolve towards models with passive recovery, wireless charging, and artificial intelligence algorithms, Formula One seems to have locked itself into a rigid structure that prioritizes control over innovation. The frustration is evident. Teams like Mercedes, Honda, and Ferrari have invested colossal resources in adapting their power plants to these regulations, and are now discovering that the complexity of the system could make them more vulnerable rather than more competitive. Instead of a free technical revolution, What they face is a golden cage, brilliant in appearance, but limiting in its execution. What should be the pinnacle of motorsport engineering is now perceived as an experiment dictated by politics rather than pure performance. Time is against us. Every week that passes without changes to the regulations brings the sport closer to the point of no return. The 2026 preseason will not only mark the beginning of a new technical cycle, it will also be an institutional litmus test. If the FIA remains firm in its stance, the conflict could escalate to the highest level of confrontation in the sport's recent history. But if he gives in even partially, the door would open to a new stage of dialogue, review, and possible consensus. Subscribe to continue uploading more of that content. Now you really think about all this.